I'm going to start with something from the website for the Flying Spaghetti Monster. So you want to be a pastafarian? Great, consider yourself a member. There's no hoops to jump through and you don't need to pay anything. You can be a member if you don't literally believe in the Flying Spaghetti Monster. For the same reason many people in other religions don't literally believe their scripture, you can be a pastafarian without being a true believer of our scripture. By design, the only dogma allowed in the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster is the rejection of dogma. That is, there are no strict rules or regulations, there are no rituals, no prayers, or other nonsense, and every member has a say in what this church is and what it becomes. Today, I want to talk about what else the letters FSM stand for, and that is free of the statist mentality. Like our introductory statement went, atheism is to religion or gods what anarchism is to the government or states. And calling yourself a humanist or a naturalist rather than an atheist is like an anarchist calling themselves a voluntarist. This is because many want to remove themselves from the negative connotations of the words anarchism and atheism. The word atheist simply means without a God belief, and the word anarchy simply means without rulers. Anarchy is misunderstood by a great deal of people to mean chaos and disorder, but it simply means without political violence. Creationists say things like, well, I didn't evolve from a monkey, and even if I accepted your evolution thing, where did monkeys come from then, huh? They didn't just pop out of nowhere, primordial soup. Ha, that's ridiculous. And even if you spent a lot of time exploring this topic, and you answer the questions, and you address every logical fallacy they mention, and you go on and on about biogenesis and evolution and the scientific method, they will follow up that in-depth answer with something like, well, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. You have your belief system and I have mine. Besides, people need something to believe in. Even you believe in something. You believe in science. And similarly, statist people often say, well, what about the roads? If you get rid of the government-funded schools, the poor kids won't be educated. What about the murderers and rapists and child molesters? If you get rid of the state, people will just do whatever they want. Without laws, there will be no justice. And even after you have a long discussion with them, addressing all the concerns they bring up, and you explain how there were roads before there were states, and that there's better ways to educate children through voluntary means, and how dispute resolution organizations, aka DROs, could better meet people's needs for safety and justice. Well, then they might just say, well, what would stop one DRO from just taking over and becoming tyrannical? We have to have a government to protect the people who couldn't afford to hire a DRO, and besides, this is a free country. If you don't like it, you can leave. In these types of arguments, the false premises are, if you don't believe in a God or a state, you are somehow evil and immoral. And if you call yourself an atheist or an anarchist, then you are somehow declaring your lack of concern for the comfort and care for the sick, the poor, and the elderly. Ultimately, both the religious and the statists are making the argument from human nature. They both declare that people are bad and need to be ruled. I disagree strongly that people are inherently bad. I believe that people are necessarily self-interested. This is not moral or immoral. It just is. People high in the food chain in governments and religions of the world are motivated by their own self-interest in maintaining the status quo. The heads of these governments and churches are not evil. They too are individuals working out for their own interests. Both of these entities contain individuals that play to the self-interest of human nature by twisting it and corrupting it in the attempt to control others. Wikipedia explains voluntarism as a philosophy according to which all forms of human association should be voluntary. This moral principle is called the non-aggression principle, which prohibits the initiation of aggressive force or coercion. The word initiation is used here to make it clear that voluntarism does not oppose self-defense. Many of us accept that gods do not exist. Well, the state does not exist either, but it is much harder to not believe in the state due to the entanglement between a government and its control over the minds of the individuals in a society. When I say that gods and states do not exist, I simply mean that they are both only existing as an accepted entity in your mind. In the same way a tree exists, but a forest does not. A forest is an idea, a concept for a group of individual trees. Objectivism101.com states that there are two basic ways of understanding the relationship between individuals in a group. The first way is individualism, which states that each individual is acting on his or her own, making their own choices, and to the extent they interact with the rest of the group, it's as individuals. Collectivism is the second way, and it views the group as the primary entity. Ethically speaking, there are a number of problems with collectivism. For instance, because the collective is seen as having an importance higher than the individuals that make it up, those same individuals are asked to sacrifice for it. It is created into an intrinsic value and destroys one's ability to rationally pursue one's own self-interest. It also interferes with justice. Collectivism destroys proper moral judgment by attributing value choices to the whole group, instead of the person making that choice. Individualism is the proper approach to this problem. Moral judgments are made by moral agents. The person making the decision gets credit or blame for it. Values are agent relative, and the person makes his choices by seeing how the value impacts his life. It is the individual that ethics is concerned with, and collectivism just obscures this point. When discussing these ideas of godlessness and statelessness, empathy can be a really useful tool to get our needs for understanding and communication met. By understanding the other person's needs, you can start to see through the accusations and name-calling and endless logical fallacies, and understand that that person maybe has some fears about their own security. A good way to achieve empathy is by using nonviolent communication, also known as NVC. All human beings share the same needs, though the strategies we use to meet those needs may differ. Physical needs include things like air, food, water, sleep, sexual expression, safety, and shelter. And emotional and mental needs include autonomy, connection, honesty, play, peace, understanding, cooperation, etc. Our desire to meet needs, whether conscious or unconscious, underlies every action we take. We only resort to violence or other actions that don't meet our own needs or others' needs when we do not recognize more effective strategies. All human beings have an innate capacity for compassion, though not always the knowledge of how to access it. When we are met with compassion and respect for our autonomy, we tend to have more access to our own compassion for ourselves and for others. The most direct path to peace is through self-connection. Understanding our own feelings and needs is very important, and you kind of have to understand yourself before you can truly understand another. One key intention when using NVC is trying to see beyond right and wrong. The aim is to get out of our habit of making moralistic judgments and to focus instead on whether or not human needs appear met. As far as the protective use of force goes, NVC aims to use the minimum force necessary in order to protect, not to educate, punish, or get what we want without the other's agreement. And only in situations where we find that dialogue fails to meet an immediate need for physical safety. And of course, returning to that dialogue as soon as we have reestablished a sense of that physical safety once. When you begin to see the domination society that we live in, you can't help but recognize that it starts with the childhood. First with the authority figure of the parents, and of course that parent's religion, and then the teachers, and then the government. Kids are told they should do it because I said so, or do it because if you don't, you will be punished, or do it and you will get a reward. If we could start by treating children with more respect, if we can assist them in discovering this world and encourage them to explore the topics that interest them, if we can help them develop and grow rather than imposing rules and ordering them around, if we stop with the punishments and rewards meme, people's natural curiosity and compassion will lead to intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation produced by the carrot and stick treat training that many of us are so familiar with. If we can individually work on these things wherever possible, then we will, as a society, produce a happier, healthier, freer people. When talking to people about the radical ideas of no gods and no governments, and especially when I start talking about how it relates to the family and childhood, empathy is essential. If I start shaking the foundations of people's deeply held beliefs without empathizing, a lot of enemy imagery happens, and people tend to go on the defense and not hear the ideas that I'm putting forward. Walls are put up to protect the self-esteem of that individual whose beliefs are being questioned. My goal for the speech was to bring these ideas up with a more open-minded crowd and get discussions going about these important ideas. I only ask that you do not write off these ideas as radical and extreme, but investigate for yourselves. Do not be afraid to dig a bit deeper and question the superstitious appeal to the authority that we are all indoctrinated with. I'm going to end with a quote from Scott Banfield, which is a good friend of mine. That which you refuse to question becomes the handle of your control. Thank you for your time, and may you be touched by his noodly appendage.